Hello, my young friends and families. Welcome back to the Fireside Storyteller, where we bring timeless tales to life through the magic of imagination. Today, we're exploring one of Hans Christian Andersen's most beloved stories, The Ugly Duckling. You know, Hans Christian Andersen was quite the storyteller himself. He traveled all across Europe with nothing but his stories in his pocket and magic in his heart. From the humble beginnings in Denmark, he would visit grand palaces and simple cottages alike, gathering children around him just as we are gathered here today. He didn't need fancy pictures or special effects, just his voice and the sparkle in his eyes as he shared his tales. Even when he visited great kings and queens, he always said his favorite audience was children, because they knew how to see with their hearts as well as their eyes. Like Andersen, that's what we do here at the Fireside Storyteller. We create magic together, you and I, painting pictures with words and imagination. Think of your mind as a movie screen where you're both the director and the audience. The colors you imagine, the faces that you create, the sounds that you hear, they're all uniquely yours, making each story special in its own way. Now, before we begin, I'd love to invite you to join our growing family of storytellers. That little subscribe button, think of it as your key to the magic story circle. And when you tap that like button, you're helping other families discover these treasured tales. Plus, it lets me know that you're enjoying our time together by our virtual fireplace. Picture with me a warm summer day in the countryside where golden cornfields sway in the breeze and golden meadows stretch as far as the eye can see. Can you feel the warm sun on your face? Can you hear the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze? That's where our story begins. Remember, there are no rules in imagination. Your duckling might look different from mine, and that's perfectly fine. That's the beauty of storytelling. Each of us creates our own unique version in our mind's eye. Are you ready to begin this magical journey? Then gather close to our virtual fireplace and let's discover together why being different isn't just okay. It might be the most wonderful thing of all. The Ugly Duckling. Now, picture, if you will, a perfect summer day, painted by nature's finest brush. The golden cornfields danced in the warm breeze like waves of sunshine, while oats sparkled with morning dew, catching the light like thousands of tiny diamonds. Scattered across the rolling meadows stood proud haystacks, rising from the earth like nature's own castles. Through this enchanted scene, a magnificent stork is paraded on legs as red as berry juice, practicing the peculiar chattering sounds his mother had taught him, each click and clack echoing across the peaceful countryside. Like a patchwork of a quilt sewn by giant hands, lush forests embrace these meadows, hiding within their depths pools of water so crystal clear you could count the pebbles on the surface. And oh, what a place for adventure it was. Near where a lazy river curved like a blue ribbon, an old farmhouse stood watch, its weathered walls telling stories of countless seasons past. Between the house and the water's edge grew the most remarkable burdock plants that you've ever seen. Their leaves spread so wide and green that a child could use them as nature's own umbrella, creating magical hideaways where imagination could run wild. In this hidden wonderland, beneath the grandest burdock leaf of all, sat a mother duck. Atop her precious nest, her warm feathers gently cushioning her eggs as she waited for them to hatch. Truth be told, she was beginning to feel just a tiny bit fidgety. Patience had never been her strongest virtue, and these eggs were taking their sweet time about hatching. To make matters worse, she was feeling rather lonely as the other ducks found the slippery bank too much trouble to navigate just for a friendly chat. Really, she would mutter to herself, you'd think they could make just a little effort to visit the mother-to-be. Quack, 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 quack. Then, one particularly memorable morning, the most wonderful sound filled the air. Crack! Then another crack. Like tiny drummers announcing their arrival, the eggs began to break. One by one, out popped the most adorable little ducklings you could imagine, each one raising its fuzzy head toward the sky and announcing its arrival with delicate beep, 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 beep. Quack, 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 said the mother duck, their tiny voices quivering with excitement as they took their very first breath of fresh morning air. Quack, 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 exclaimed the mother duck, her heart nearly bursting with joy. Each of her precious babies tried its very best to quack in their response, though their little voices came out more like squeaky toys rather than proper duck calls. That's okay. Their bright eyes grew wide with wonder as they gazed up at the enormous green leaves towering above them like nature's cathedral. Look around, my darlings, their mother encouraged softly. The green is good for your eyes. Though, she added with the knowing smile, I suspect everything is good for your eyes right now. The world is so enormous, the ducklings whispered in awe, huddling close together as they took their first look at their surroundings. Everything seemed magical to them, from the gentle rustle of the leaves overhead to the soft earth beneath their webbed feet. Enormous! Their mother's eyes twinkled with amusement. My dear ones, this is just the corner of our little garden. Wait until you see how far it stretches, all the way to the pasture field. Though, I must admit, she added with a modest duck smile, I've never quite wandered that far myself. She stood carefully, her mother instincts prompting her to count her precious brood. Her expression suddenly shifted to concern. Oh my! The largest egg still hasn't hatched. Oh, she sighed, setting back down on her nest. Just then, an old duck waddled up to pay her a visit, her experienced eyes taking in the scene. Well, how's the hatching coming along? Quack, 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 she called out cheerfully. Most everything is wonderful, replied the mother duck, but this one egg simply refuses to crack. Though just look at my other darlings. She beamed with pride. They're the very image of their father, who, I might add, she continued with a slight roll of her eyes, hasn't even bothered to step by once to see them. The old duck peered at the remaining egg with the wisdom that comes from many seasons of duck rearing. She mused, adjusting her position to get a better look. If you ask me, that looks like a turkey egg. Had the same thing happen to me once. Those babies were absolutely terrified of water. No matter how I called or demonstrated, they wouldn't go near it. My advice, she shook her head knowingly, leave it be and focus on teaching these lovely ones to swim. Just wait a moment longer, said the mother duck to her wise visitor. I've sat here so long already, a few more minutes won't hurt. and so she settled more comfortably on her nest, the warm summer breeze rustling through the burdock leaves above. At last the big egg began to crack, but when the little one finally emerged, everyone stared in surprise. This baby was much larger than the others had, and instead of being lovely yellow-brown coloring of his siblings, he was dull gray, dark. The mother duck looked at him carefully, tilting her head from side to side. "Well, he's certainly different," she said slowly, "but I'm sure just as healthy as the others. Perhaps he just needs a good swim." The very next morning, the sun sparkled like diamonds on the river as Mother Duck led her family toward the water. "Follow me, everyone," she called cheerfully. "Remember to stay close together." One by one, she watched proudly as her ducklings splashed into the river. Even the big gray one swam beautifully, his strong legs propelling him through the water with perfect form. "Well, at least he's a good swimmer," Mother Duck said to herself. Actually, when you look closely, he carries himself quite gracefully. "Now then, everyone," she announced, "time to meet the other ducks. Mind your manners, and remember to bow politely. A well-bred duckling always shows good manners." The duck yard was bustling with activity when they arrived. Two families were fighting over an eel's head, which a cat eventually stole from them both. The mother duck guided her brood through the chaos, teaching them the ways of duck society. But everywhere they went, the other birds stared at the large gray duckling and whispered among themselves. "He's much too big," they said, "and such an unusual color. A proper duckling should be small and golden brown." Even the turkey by the fence, who thought himself very important because he had been born with spurs, puffed up like a ship in full sail and strutted over to inspect the newcomer. The poor gray duckling didn't know where to hide. His heart felt heavy as stones as he listened to the unkind whispers. His own brothers and sisters began to tease him, saying, "The cat doesn't even like you, and neither do we." His mother would scold them, her heart aching to see children treating each other so poorly. But she couldn't be everywhere at once. Day after day, the gray duckling's life grew harder. The ducks pecked him, the chickens bullied him, and even the girl who fed the birds kicked at him. Finally, one cold autumn morning, he could bear it no longer. The duckling spread his stronger than usual wings, and he flew over the garden fence, not caring where he went, just needing to escape the cruelty of the farmyard for a small time. His heart raced with both fear and hope as he flew higher and higher, leaving behind the only home he'd ever known. His journey led him to a vast marsh where wild ducks made their home. As evening painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, he settled among the tall reeds, exhausted from his flight. All night long he huddled there, the wind whispering secrets through the rushes, while stars twinkled overhead like distant lanterns. When dawn broke, painting the marsh in soft morning light, the wild ducks discovered their unusual visitor. "What sort of duck are you?" they asked, circling around him curiously. Though they were a bit rough in their manners, they welcomed him to stay, as long as he didn't try to marry into their families. For 2 whole days he rested among them, until suddenly the peace was shattered by sharp crack across the water. Hunters had arrived. The marsh erupted into chaos. Shots rang out and filled the air with smoke that drifted like ghostly fingers through the reeds. Dogs splashed through the shallows, their excited bark, 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 echoing across the water. The poor duckling dove deep into the water, his heart pounding like a drum. And when he finally dared to peek above the surface, he found himself completely alone. Every wild duck had fled or had fallen. As evening approached, bringing blessed quiet to the marsh, our brave duckling seized his chance to escape. But this was just the beginning of his long and difficult journey through the changing seasons. As autumn gave way to winter's icy grip, each day brought new challenges that would test his strength and courage in ways he never imagined. Winter's icy fingers reached across the land, transforming the world into glittering white but dangerous realm. The duckling's days became a constant struggle against the bitter cold that turned the lake's edges to crystal. Each splash became a battle as they formed ice on his feathers, making them heavy and stiff. At night he had to keep swimming in circles just to prevent the water from freezing around him completely. One evening, just as the sun was painting the sky in watercolor shades of pink and gold, he spotted what looked like a glimmer of hope. A humble cottage with a crooked chimney puffing cheerful clouds of smoke into the twilight air. The poor duckling had grown so weary that his legs barely moved in the icy water. Desperate for shelter, he waddled toward the welcoming light, shining through the cottage window. Inside lived an old woman with her cat and a hen. The cat, whom she called Sunny, was a master at purring. You've all heard that before. And even could arch his back and send sparks flying when you stroked his fur the wrong way. The hen, called Chickie, was quite proud of her short legs and laid the most perfectly formed eggs. Both pets were the old woman's pride and joy, and she considered them the wisest creatures in the world, second only to herself, of course. The duckling lay by the door for 3 days and nights, half frozen and hardly moving, until the old woman finally discovered him. "Well, what have we here?" she said, her voice rough but not unkind. She brought him inside, where the warmth began to thaw his frozen feathers. The cat greeted him with a suspicious purr, while the hen cluck, 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 doubtfully. For a while the cottage seemed like a paradise compared to the frozen world outside. But soon the cat and hen made it clear that they considered themselves far superior to all other creatures. "Can you purr?" said the cat. "Can you lay eggs?" demanded the hen. When the duckling admitted he could do neither, they sneered. "Then you have no right to an opinion about anything." The cold weather days in the cottage ticked by slowly, like the steady drip of melting icicles. The duckling found himself lost in daydreams, staring through the frosted window pane at patches of blue sky between the clouds. Sometimes he would catch glimpses of wild birds soaring overhead. Their wings spread wide in graceful freedom, and his heart would flutter with a strange, unexplainable longing. "What on earth are you sighing about?" the hen would cluck, 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 cluck impatiently, scratching at invisible specks on the wooden floor. "You're warm, you're fed, you have a roof over your head. Isn't that enough?" The cat would stretch lazily by the fire, adding with a yawn, "Oh, why don't you try being useful and lay some eggs, or at least learn to purr properly," said the sleepy cat. But the duckling's heart yearned for something more. For fresh air, a smell of wild roses and water lilies, for the feeling of cool water rippling against his feathers, for the simple joy of floating beneath the endless sky. One morning, while the old woman wasn't looking, he spotted his chance. A door left slightly ajar, swaying gently in the breeze. With his heart pounding like a tiny drum, he slipped away into the awakening spring. Oh, what a glorious world awaited him! The ice had melted into sparkling streams that danced through the meadows. Young flowers poked their heads through the soft earth, nodding hello to the warm sun. The air itself seemed alive with possibilities, carrying the sweet whispers of approaching spring on every breeze. Near a sheltered pond bordered by nodding yellow flowers, the duckling discovered something that made his heart skip a beat. 3 beautiful swans gliding across the water, their white feathers gleaming like fresh snow, their long necks gracefully curved like figurines in the dance. Something stirred deep inside him as he watched them, a feeling he couldn't quite understand, like remembering a dream he'd never actually had. The young duckling's heart filled with both wonder and sadness as he watched the magnificent swans. I'll fly closer, he decided, even if they come at me and peck me for being so ugly and daring to approach them. Better to face their judgment than live forever wondering. With trembling wings, he glided down to the pond, his reflection shimmering in the rippling water below. But when he bent his head to accept whatever fate awaited him, he gasped in astonishment. Looking back at him from the water's surface was not the awkward gray bird he remembered, but a graceful young swan. His long neck curved elegantly, and his feathers gleamed pure white in the spring sunshine. The mysterious ache had carried in his heart suddenly made perfect sense. This was who he had been all along, awaiting to emerge like a flower from its bud. The other swans glided toward him, their wings brushing the waters like silk as they welcomed him to their family. Such joy he had never known. Children running along the shoreline called out, "Look! A new swan! And isn't he the most beautiful of all?" The spring breeze carried their delighted laughter across the pond, and the young swan felt his heart might burst with happiness. As he arched his neck to preen his brilliant white feathers, he thought to himself, "I've never dreamed of such happiness when I was an ugly duckling." The warm sun sparkled on his wings as he glided across the pond with his new family, finally home where he belonged. Around him, the other swans moved in a graceful dance, their gentle wake creating ripples that caught the light that scattered diamonds on the water surface. Oh, so our young friend discovered that being different wasn't a curse at all. It was simply the first chapter in a much grander story. Sometimes the most challenging beginnings lead us to the most beautiful destinations, if only we have the courage to keep swimming forward, one day at a time. Well, my friends, Wasn't that a beautiful journey? You know, I just love how this story reminds us that what makes us different might just be what makes us extraordinary. Our little friend didn't turn into a beautiful swan. He was a swan all along. He just needed time to grow into what he was meant to be. I hope this story stays with you long after our time together ends. Remember, kindness costs nothing, yet its absence can cost everything. The next time you meet someone who seems different or out of place, think of our swan friend. Maybe they're not odd or awkward at all. Maybe they're just a swan who hasn't found their wings yet, and you can be kind. And while you're thinking about that, don't forget to tap the subscribe button to join our storytelling family, and give us a like if this tale touched your heart. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe share a time when you felt different, or tell us about someone who showed you kindness when you needed it most. Anyway, until next time, remember, my friends, being different isn't a flaw. It is your first chapter of an amazing story. Keep your hearts open, kindness flowing, and your imagination soaring. We'll see you next week by our digital fireplace.